Hello, History and Heritage Explorers. Behind me is Plymouth Rock, so let's go learn more about this historic location here in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Hello, History and Heritage Explorers. Welcome to my favorite section of the library, and that would be the history section. Now, legend holds that Plymouth Rock, which is located on the shore of Plymouth Harbor in Massachusetts, is the very spot where William Bradford and the other pilgrims first set foot on land after disembarking from the Mayflower on December the 26th of 1620. So join us as we travel up to the Pilgrim Memorial State Park and explore the story of this larger-than-life chunk of granite and icon of the United States, Plymouth Rock. 15-year-old John Faunch arrived in Plymouth aboard a ship called the Anne on July the 10th of 1623, 3 years after the first pilgrims had landed. Led by William Bradford, this first group formed the second permanent colony in America after Jamestown and would be the first permanent colony to be built in what would be known as New England. As John settled into his new home, he learned about the hardships that the first arrivals faced on their journey across the sea, as well as the location of the spot where their new home had begun. In 1633, John married Patience Morton, and together they would welcome into this world 11 children. There was Priscilla, Mary, Patience, Sarah, Thomas, Elizabeth, Mercy, Joseph, John, Edward, and Nathaniel. But the odd journey of the star of this story, Plymouth Rock, begins with their fifth child, a young boy named Thomas. Young Thomas, born in September of 1647, spent his childhood years doing what pilgrim children do: planting, praying, harvesting, praying, tending to the animals, praying, mending fences, and, well, more praying. But when he was not working or praying, young Tom learned the history of the colony from his father and the other original pilgrims, including William Bradford. One lesson occurred one day when Thomas and his father were walking the shoreline. John pointed to a rock and said to his son that that big rock that lied before them is where their colony began, and it is where our story ends for the next 88 years. In 1741, 121 years after the Mayflower had brought the pilgrims to this land, a now 94-year-old Thomas Faunch had learned that a wharf was being built in this area of the rock that he had learned as a child to be the spot of the Plymouth forefathers' arrivals. Tom, who by this time had built up quite the resume as the deacon of the First Church in 1686, then elder in 1694, as well as holding the title of First Clerk of Keeping of Records, was held in high regard as a man of true character. He wanted to see this spot before it was covered. He was carried on a chair over 3 miles by his neighbors to the shore where a crowd of townsfolk had gathered for this rare outing by their town's elder. Tom pointed and announced that this rock was the exact spot where the first settlers stepped into their new home, and a simple marker was placed, and it is here where this story ends for the next 34 years. Now fast forward to 1774. The treasonous thoughts of liberty were spreading across New England and had taken hold in Plymouth. A liberty pole, which is a traditional tool of political protest and celebration, was being erected in the center of town. Now, during the American Revolution, these wooden poles served as flagpoles or for the display of political dissent and were often erected in their town squares. The citizens of Plymouth felt that the big rock in which the pilgrims first stepped after they left England to pursue religious freedom would be a great symbolic addition to their liberty pole. The men of Plymouth gathered on the beach with around 60 oxen and worked to lift their beloved stone from the sand when it broke into two. Some who witnessed the sight considered the breaking symbolic of the division between the colonies in England, so the top half was moved to town and the bottom remained on the shore. And it is here that our story concludes. Until 60 years later, when in 1834 the top half was moved again, and unbelievably, it broke again. This time, instead of breaking the stone while lifting it, it fell off an oxen cart on its way to its new home in front of the Plymouth Hall Museum. Even here at the museum, the stone was losing mass as people chipped off pieces for souvenirs until the museum decided to put up a fence around it. And here is where our story ends. For the next 25 years, souvenir hunters had turned their attention to the bottom half, which lay unprotected. So in 1859, construction began on a protective canopy, but paused during the U.S. Civil War. After the war ended, construction resumed, and it was completed in 1867. And now our story is done. Until 13 years later, when in 1880 the top half was hoisted from its resting spot, returned to the shore from which it came, and cemented back to its bottom half after 100 years of separation. The numbers 1620 that were painted on it was scrubbed off, and 1620 was nicely carved into it. And here's where the tale of this rock finishes. Until 40 years later, when in 1920 a Romanesque temple was built in replacement for the canopy that had been protecting the bottom half of this rock since 1867 and the top since 1880. After the breaks during its moves and years of rock chipping souvenir seekers chipping away at it, Plymouth Rock is about half the size it was as when Thomas Fouch pointed it out to the crowd of onlookers in 1741 and said, "That's the rock." About 1/3 of the rock is visible today, while the rest lies hidden underneath the sand. Now, some folks say that no, the Pilgrims never set foot on Plymouth Rock, and that just might be. But the journey of this beautiful chunk of granite is a wonderful part of our history and heritage, and the one fact that I can tell you about this story is here's where it actually ends. On behalf of History and Heritage Explorers, I would like to say thank you very much. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and share it with others. To learn more about the Pilgrims or Plymouth Rock, head to your local public library or school library and check out one of the many books about this subject. Until next time, keep on exploring.